Today, let's talk about how to stop sabotaging your business and how, depending on what money habit archetype you are, there are different ways that you may be slowing down your business growth and really getting in the way. And very importantly, we'll talk about the practical everyday things you can do to help stop the sabotage. Welcome back to Freedom and Ease in Online Business, the go-to podcast for online coaches and service providers ready to ditch burnout, master their money, and build a thriving and profitable business that feels joyful, aligned, and sustainable. Welcome back. Now, this episode today is based on a training I recently ran for my academy, and I'm actually making that available to you. So all you need to do is jump on the link that I'll pop below this episode to get access to that. So what we're going to do is let's talk about the 3 money habit archetypes. If you don't know anything about money habit archetypes, it's probably a good idea to go back to the previous episode where I outlined them a little bit in detail. And I also talked about the importance of, yes, unraveling those deeper unconscious stories that are driving that behavior and that pattern, but also that it's important and that we can do some practical everyday things, which is what we're focusing on today, that really help stop the sabotage, ensure that you start kind of shifting those patterns and that actually make that shifting of the unconscious stories so much easier. So we're going to start by talking about the spender money habit archetype, which is the one where money comes and poof, it's gone again, right? And the spender kind of sits a little bit in the middle, and a lot of people will identify with many spender traits. So, just because you have established that one archetype is your main kind of behavior pattern doesn't mean you don't sometimes exhibit some of the traits from the others. So all of this will be helpful to you. So we'll start with the spender because they sit in the middle. Now, what often happens with the spender is that their business ends up feeling overwhelming and under-resourced. And that's because they're spending money on the wrong things at the wrong time, because the spender tends to be in a habit of when money's available, they'll just blow it on bright, shiny objects without being really strategic. So the other thing that tends to happen for spenders, because their comfort zone is in when the money comes, it disappears again, they unconsciously actually create that. And so unexpected expenses and opportunities will always pop up, and the spender will find ways to get rid of money really quickly. And what that means is, from a business point of view, they'll be lacking money for strategic growth. They're spending on the wrong things at the wrong time, and they're not really investing in and putting money aside for that strategic growth. And so it's not hard to see, right, how that can negatively impact your business. So those bright, shiny objects, the other thing that they do is they cause confusion and overwhelm, as well as draining resources of money and time and focus. So that's why the spender in business can quickly feel completely overwhelmed and under-resourced. So let's talk about some of the ways that the spender can address these things at the conscious level with everyday little simple things that they can implement to shift that pattern. So one of the things for the spender is it's really important for them to have money for fun stuff, to be able to just spend money on fun and to have that allocated and front and center for them, so that they really get to focus on, hey, I've got plenty of money to spend on fun stuff, but at the same time, they need to be making sure that they're protecting the money that's there for strategic growth, for wealth creation, and so on. And so that's why a spender really benefits from outsourcing that wealth creation, automating all that side of things, all the responsible things around your money, to a system. And the fun money needs to be front and center for them, so that they can really have that experience of money is fun and I've got plenty to enjoy. Now, the other thing that really serves the spender well is to remove temptations and put some rules in place around spending. So out of sight, out of mind is a really good approach for the spender. And then setting some rules in place, such as, if I spend over this much, I can, but I need to sleep on it first. And just adding in that little pattern interrupt will give the spender time for that impulse urge to die down and for them to make a better, more rational decisions. So, we're going to quickly talk about the overextender. Now, the overextender is the one that seems to be perpetually going backwards. Their net worth seems to be always shrinking instead of growing. And that's because they like to leverage money. They also like the excitement and they like to make things happen quickly. And so they tend to kind of outsource their financial responsibility. You know, it's always someone else's fault or the economy or bad luck or that person that ripped them off. And that's why they're not where they want to be financially. And then they always have some plan for making it all happen overnight. So that's kind of the overextender. And you probably know people like that. I was raised by a person like that. So that's a pattern that when it comes to business, just basically means they end up building a business that is lacking resilience, and that's not sustainable because they do the same thing in business. They leverage too much and then they're constantly leveraging more to try and keep ahead and to try and grow way beyond where they actually are right now. They don't allow those solid foundations to kind of settle in first, and they're always jumping way too far ahead. So they live beyond their means and they grow their business in that way as well. And so they're really kind of building a house of cards where it's lacking the solid foundations, and they'll often have to continue leveraging to try and stay afloat. Now, the other thing that happens is they have big cash flow pressure. They struggle for cash flow. And so time is always a big stress factor in their life as well. And they tend to have big budget blowouts because they'll just go, all right, well, I'll just, invest into this thing and that's what's going to save the day. And so their net worth is shrinking. They've got the time pressure, the money pressure, and the whole thing is just on a knife's edge. And so for the overextender, or for people who have some of those tendencies from time to time, the practical things that are really helpful are, number one, get a huge why. The reason why you want to build solid foundations, why it's worth practicing a little bit of delayed gratification and working towards the future. You want that to be really big and really front and center. For the overextender, all the rules that apply to the spender are important. Plus, they will need that big why. And what also really helps them is to break things down into exciting baby steps. If you give them a big future financial goal, that's just too boring, too far away for them. They need to bring things up closer and make them more exciting. And the other thing that's really helpful for an overextender archetype is to link those little milestones to really exciting rewards so that they start learning that by achieving these little financial milestones, they actually get to have more fun money, more kind of those dopamine hits along the way. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the accumulator. And the accumulator money habit archetype are the ones I tend to work with the most because they're interested in building financial security and stability. And the interesting thing with the accumulator is that they never really quite think they qualify for the title because they haven't accumulated enough. So the problem with that pattern is that no amount of money ever helps them feel safe when that pattern is driven by an unconscious story of it's not okay to relax and it's not okay to spend on yourself because you've got to keep securing for the future, but there's no real end goal or end point where they go, okay, good, I feel secure now. And so just because they have a pattern that seems on the surface to be a really healthy pattern doesn't mean it's driven from a healthy place. So for the overextender, the problem tends to become in business that their business growth actually stagnates, that it's slow and that it's costly and that it's exhausting them because what they are great at is startup mode. They're great at starting a business on a shoestring budget and just making a whole lot happen off the back of their own efforts because they don't really like to spend money on support and outsourcing and things like that. They do it all themselves. And so in business, that's great in startup mode. But then you get to a certain point where you do need to start putting support systems and structures in place, where you do need to be able to leverage to go to another level. And so for the accumulator, what actually happens is that they try to continue operating in startup mode and they actually slow their business growth down. And in the end, it costs them a whole lot more. They also end up feeling really burnt out and overwhelmed because they're trying to DIY absolutely everything to save money. So They don't have the support, which means they end up being more burnt out and stressed. And because they're not investing in systems that they can scale for the future, they end up being even more stressed and having even more problems because they don't have those systems in place that can take their business where they want to go next. And because they tend to really hesitate about investing in guidance and support, coaching, consultants, and so on, they lack direction and focus. And so they're trying to figure it all out themselves, which slows them down, means they waste time and resources on the wrong strategic things. And so overall, they're actually going much slower and working way harder than they need to be. So what really helps the accumulator from a practical everyday point of view is kind of the opposite to the spender. What we want them to do is to be forced to spend money on fun stuff so that they start getting into the habit of spending on themselves, on being supported, on their self-care, and so on. They also kind of need to learn to force themselves to spend money on business support for the same reason. There needs to be a budget and it has to be spent. Someone's got to be helping you somewhere. Someone's got to be helping you take care of yourself, and someone has to be helping you take care of your business. And that's about expanding that comfort zone. Because here's the thing. We can work on shifting unconscious stories till the cows come home. But if we don't at the same time start shifting and expanding our comfort zone of how we operate on a day-to-day level, those stories being shifted will only take us so far. So you need to do both. And for the accumulator, it's also really important that they set up those systems to help secure their wealth, help secure their financial stability and security, and that they have that front and center so that they know, yes, I can spend money on being supported, on having some fun, on having someone help me grow my business, because my financial security has already been locked in and is taken care of. So they need to make sure they systemize that and keep it front and center. Kind of opposite to the spender, where we want to systemize it and then put it aside so they're not looking at it and being tempted. For the accumulator, we want to put it front and center because they love seeing money locked away that they can't touch, that is their financial security. So those are some practical ways that, depending on your money habit archetype, you can help stop the sabotage patterns and also support yourself as you do the work on the deeper unconscious stories that are driving those patterns. Now, if you didn't catch the previous episode and you're still a bit confused about money habit archetypes, then click the link below to jump on and listen to that next. Make sure you know what your money habit archetype is. I have a free quiz and the link for that will be below this as well. And of course, the entire Stop the Sabotage training that gives you all the nitty-gritty breakdown on practical things you can do depending on your money habit archetype to stop the sabotage, grow your business, and help shift those unconscious patterns and stories. That's available to you as well. That training was run exclusively for my academy, but you can access it right now by clicking the link below. I will see you in the next episode, and in the meantime, have yourself a magical day. Bye for now.